If you can hear me, just let me know. Hey, Fonda. Hey, Jill. Is sound okay? Perfect. How's your guys' evening going? Hey, Nancy. Daniel, DJ. Good, good, good. So while we're waiting for other people, because people are still coming in, I want to start with questions from last week's class. Last week we talked extensively about symbolism, and your homework was to go and work with certain symbols that appealed to you, getting input for what they represent from your guides, and then taking concepts and then asking your guides for symbols. So, did you guys have any issues, any questions, any troubleshooting things from last week's class? Or any questions that have come up for you since last week? Brandy says some signs and symbols don't resonate with me, and that's okay. Everyone's symbolism is going to be different. The symbols that we're drawn to are going to be different. The symbols that our guides favor are going to be a little bit different. Jill says same as Brandy. Yeah. And you will notice too that over time your symbolism will evolve, and sometimes spirit will give you a symbol and it might not be one that you asked for, it might not even be one that makes sense, but then you have to kind of figure out the meaning, and sometimes it's only through trial and error that the understanding of the meaning takes place. Denise Lee says they like to use TV shows and movies from when I was a kid. So like they use references that you're comfortable with, that you're familiar with. I'll give an example of this. And this has been true for me for years, when I first started reading, occasionally I would get this image of a red balloon, and I had no idea what it meant. I didn't, I had no personal associations with the red balloon. I couldn't really extrapolate anything that was necessarily specific from a red balloon, and it was only through trial and error that I figured out that when the red balloon was shown to me, it represented a birthday, either the birthday for the communicator or a birthday from the communicator, acknowledging someone here in the physical that has just happened or is just coming up. So that was a symbol of mine for years and years, and then one day, this was about 2 years ago, I was doing a reading, and Spirit showed me a silver mylar balloon. And so because I understood that the symbolism of the red latex balloon represented birthday, I knew that this mylar balloon had to be another marker of some sort. And so it was through communicating that thought process to the client that we were able to kind of deduce that when I see the mylar balloon, it represents the anniversary of someone's passing. And so your symbols will evolve over time, but if you have a basic understanding of the symbols that you worked with, the evolution of the symbols will kind of follow suit and make sense a little bit. Jill, part of her message is cut off, but she says sometimes it's hard to know if a symbol like a heart is actually a symbol meaning or an actual heart. Again, it's like trial and error, and when you're giving a symbol, you always give the symbol as well as the interpretation of what you think it might mean. So just don't say, I see this, it means this, or just don't say, I'm picking up X, Y, and Z. You say, I see this, which usually represents for me this. It may also be this, but my primary feeling is this, because you could be cutting yourself short. And I'll give you an example. if I was communicating with a woman who had passed, and she showed me the image of Bambi, like the cartoon character, if she showed me the image of Bambi, in my mind, if I was more of a into like the animals and stuff, I might look at, okay, do I feel into this? Does this feel like deer? Is this messages about deers? Why did it come in this particular form from like the Disney movie? So then the next second theme that kind of stands out in your mind, I see Bambi, I see someone who lost their mother at a young age. So that could be one interpretation of it, and maybe that's correct. So I could say, I have a sense, or I'm seeing that you may have lost someone who's like a mother to you while you were still at a very young age. And that might be, as I said, it might be correct. But if I said, they're showing me the Disney character of Bambi, and I feel like maybe you lost someone who was like a mother to you at a very young age, it could have more importance, because maybe that person did lose their mother, but maybe Bambi was one of her favorite movies, and after her mom passed, she went and got a tattoo of Bambi. So by not sharing the symbol and just sharing what you think the symbol means, you could be cutting off some evidence that's really important in your message work. Does that make sense? Do you understand why you give what you see as well as what you feel or think for it to mean? Because it could have so many different layers to it. So before we talk about tonight's topic of discussion, which is spirit guides, any last questions from the symbolisms class? And Denise, you're absolutely right. Give what you get, stay in the right brain. Nana, that's one that you're going to have to figure out. That's part of your homework. It's to figure out what that means to you. So I'm assuming there's no more questions as far as what we talked about last week with symbolism, and we can move into spirit guides. Keep trying, Rick. Just be open and give yourself permission if you need to make it up. Because when we take ourselves out of the responsibility of achieving something or getting something right or wrong, and we feel as if we're making it up, most of the time in those moments of permission, the things that we feel we're making up tend to be correct. So, spirit guides. Most people are at least familiar with the idea of what a spirit guide is, even if it's very loosely. I think that there's a lot of information out there about spirit guides. I think that there's a lot of limiting information out there about spirit guides, and if you talk to 10 different mediums, you'll probably get 10 different stories. I'm going to give it to you the way that I believe it. I will give you some background, the way that I was taught, things that I agree with, things that I don't agree with. So the common idea of what a spirit guide is someone in the spirit world essentially is who's bringing you guidance and direction. Now, most people feel that spirit guides are either assigned to us or attracted to us, but that they come into this lifetime with us, and that they differ a bit from grandma or grandpa or people that we've lost in our life, although that's not always necessarily the case, and I'll give you some examples of that later. So spirit guides, they know your soul. They understand what you wanted to accomplish when you came into this lifetime. They are qualified and evolved enough to know how to guide you, how to direct you, how to line the right experiences up for you. You've all probably had communication from your spirit guides, even if you don't know it, because sometimes it can come through the forms of signs and symbols and synchronicities. And sometimes when we have those gut feelings to do something or to not do something, and then we ignore it and we find out that we were wrong or right, it's oftentimes the voice of our spirit guide that we are interpreting as that gut instinct or as that gut intuition. So most people don't ever acknowledge that they have spirit guides. You could think of them in the term of a guardian angel. Now, a lot of people in the New Age movement say angels and spirit guides are different because spirit guides have had lives on Earth and angels have not. I don't. To me, it's all semantics. So I don't think that we can put the spirit world in a box. If you look back in the old days of spiritualism when they talked about angels, they did not necessarily refer to winged beings from celestial spheres. The word angel meant messenger. And so if a non-physical being came forward to give a message, that would be considered a quote-unquote angel. It really wasn't until like the late 80s, early 90s that this whole like new angel Doreen Virtue-esque stuff started to come up. Angel simply meant messenger, and that's why, in the United States, the principles, the tenets of spiritualism are a little different than the UK version. The UK version talks about the principle of the ministry of angels. They're not talking about beings with wings and halos. They're talking about the fact that there are spirit people all around us who have guidance and messages for us. That's what they mean. So if you need to think of it in the term of guardian angel, like I said, it all kind of boils down to semantics, in my opinion. But I know a lot of people would disagree with me, and that's okay. So if you're just your average person, you're there, your spirit guides are there to give you direction, they're there to give you guidance. Spirit guides often act in the capacity of inspirers. Inspiration, ideas that seem to come out of the blue are often inspired by spirit guides. There are natural protection, which is why I don't believe in and or practice forms of protection, in addition to some of the ideas around natural law that we talked about in the very first live class. And I believe that we all have numerous spirit guides, and we'll get a little bit more into that here in a minute. Sylvia Browne, when she was really popular on the Montel show, she used to say that everybody had one spirit guide. Well, that's stupid. No offense, poor dead Sylvia, but that's stupid because there's not, when you think about people who help you in your life, you don't just have one person that can help you. You have a multitude of people that can help you, and those different people that can help you with different areas. They have different specialties, they have different personalities, they have different skills. So is the same for the spirit world. If you are a working medium or developing clairvoyant, your spirit guides, I think, have a little bit more of a hands-on role. One, because you're acknowledging them, which must be thrilling, because the average person who doesn't really invest in their spiritual self, can you imagine being their spirit guide? You're with them their entire life, from before they're born until they die, and you're just like aware of everything that's going on, around when needed, and ignored 100% of the time. It must be absolutely frustrating. It must be one of the most challenging lessons or mantles that a soul can choose to take up. Newsflash, if you are a working medium or healer of some sort, you will probably be a spirit guide as your next step of service, because that's what this is about. You don't just stop being a medium. You don't just stop being of service. So if you think that after you die, you're going to be floating around eating Philadelphia cream cheese on a cloud while you're playing a harp, you're sadly mistaken, because mediums are still mediums in the spirit world. There's still higher knowledge to bring down from higher levels. And if you think about the role that spirit guides play for mediums, they often act as a medium for the medium. So in addition to being inspirers and protectors and uplifters and friends and teachers and companions, and bringing wisdom, if you are working as a clairvoyant or a medium, your guide has additional responsibilities, and different guides play different roles. So we're going to look at that. So let's see here. I see there's a couple comments, so I just want to make sure I don't get behind on those. Um, so if you type long stuff, I'm not going to be able to see it. So the more concise you can be with your comments, the best that I'm going to be able to be able, it's the best that I can do to be able to help you. That being said, if you look at, so I want to look again at some terminology. Nowadays, the popular term is spirit guide or guide. If you look in the old days, you might hear other terminologies. In the heydays of spiritualism, you would hear either gatekeeper, you might hear control, that was more of a popular one, and teacher, friend, inspire. Denise, your guide, can tell you what they want to tell you. I'm just telling you the way that I know it. So, the reason, and I personally, I just like guide. And to be honest with you, I don't like the name control. Now, the name control, we don't use that very often because I think that can sometimes confuse people in thinking that our guides control us. And the one thing that I will say right off the bat is a genuine guide, genuine guidance, genuine spirit contact has no interest in controlling you, has no interest in making choices for you, has no interest in telling you what you can or cannot do. They have no interest in putting you down or putting you in situations that are not for your best and highest good. That is not true guidance. That is not true guidance. And I would refer back to natural law, and I would refer back to, am I being in my imagination? Am I being in my authenticity? Is there a level of groundedness to what's coming through? Because people get on this thing with guides and they invent guides and they get crazy and they have all these imaginary friends, and I don't want that to happen to you. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that to you as well as we talk about different ways to connect with guides. So I had a client once she was a woman who came to me as a client. This was probably 6 years ago. She came to me initially for a reading, and this woman, she was sweet, she was mousy, she was withdrawn, she was inside herself, and we had a really wonderful session, and it was like the person who walked out wasn't the same person that walked in. And so she continued to, and watching her grow was really amazing. And that has nothing to do with me, that's the power of spirit. So I was teaching one of my psychic development courses, and she came and did the course. And I always tell people, when you're seeking to open up, there's a very fine line between gifted and crazy. And if we're not careful and if we're not grounded, we can easily cross into crazy town. Because part of recognizing psychic information is intentionally putting yourself into a disassociative state. And if you're not mentally balanced, then you can cause yourself some issues. So people, who don't have a firm grasp on reality probably don't have a business opening themselves up to outside influences. That aside, she seemed to be in a good place. She came and did my psychic development class, and then she went off, and I hadn't seen her in a while. The next time I talked to her, she was in this place where it was like I didn't recognize the person. Still very open, still very friendly. However, super out of touch with reality, to the point where she would not, got rid of her television, wouldn't get dressed in the morning without asking her guides if this fabric was right for her, or that color was right for her, what she should eat for breakfast, if she should do this, if she should not do this, if she should buy this, if she should not buy that. That's not spirit. Spirit is there to guide you, and by guide you, I mean give you information, understanding, intuitions, guidance, direction, so you can make your choices, because no one can live your life for you but you. No one can make a decision. They give you the information to make the decision yourself. And we've all followed our guidance, and we've all ignored our guidance, and we've seen how well that has worked out for us. So, If a spirit is ever telling you what to do something, to not do something, to buy something, to not buy something, or anything that is of a fear-based nature, that's not spirit. Check yourself. It's not. It's not spirit. So get grounded, disconnect, take a breather, relink, and keep in mind, where are you at? Are you in a fear-based place, or are you not? Are you in a place of heightened imagination? Are you not? So, spirit guides, how do spirit guides come to us? Well, some people think it's a process of being assigned a spirit guide before we're born. So, and it's funny when people say that, I sometimes think of like being in front of a council. I'm like, yep, I'm gonna go take an incarnation. I'm gonna be born on a dairy farm in Minnesota. And they're like, this guide is the best guide for you, and we'll sign you up. And I do think, to a certain degree, there are always higher guides who know who might be a good fit for us. But we also attract guides to us. We attract guides to us through those two laws that I'm always harping on: vibration and attraction. And so, if you have interests and personality traits and hobbies and passions that are important to you, through like energies, you're going to attract spirit helpers who share those personality traits or expertises or passions to you. So you may have guides that you came into this lifetime with, but if you are, an artist and you're very passionate about your art and you're open, then you probably have attracted to you artists from the spirit world who can work with you and inspire you and your artwork. If you are a mechanic, you probably have, guides who are very mechanically inclined in life. I truly think that there's no such thing as new inventions. I think that scientists who are coming up with new ideas, doctors and pharmacists who are coming up with cures, there's a whole team of spirit people who had those passions when they were alive, who are working diligently from the spirit side of life to inspire those who are living to come to those conclusions. It's like Thomas Edison. We know him as the inventor of the light bulb. Debatable, but that's what we know him as. And Edison, and I say that being from right where I live, right down the road is Edison's birthplace. It's one of our area's many claims to fame, as well as the fact that he has interesting ties to spiritualism. But Thomas Edison was very interested in the afterlife, and one of the things that I like about Edison was that he did not sleep the way that normal people sleep. He would just take power naps. He would be up all day, but just power nap for a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and he would wake up, and when he would go to bed and be frustrated or stuck by something, he would go to sleep and he would just wake up with the answer or a solution to his problem. And I truly believe he was connecting with his guides and his guidance when he was taking those little power naps, which is, it's kind of what we can do through things like meditation. So guides can be, assigned to us. Guides can be drawn to us. I also think that we pick guides before we come into this lifetime. It's like you're in the spirit world, things are lovely, you've decided that you're going to go into the trenches, and it's like, hey Bob, I'm going in, cover my back. Yeah, I'll cover your back. And when I say that, I don't mean to take it lightly, because taking on that mantle of being a guide for someone can be a big responsibility. Now, there's going to be also two different terminologies as far as types of guides. And I'll talk about that when I talk about things like the inner band and the outer band. But one thing that's highly debated is, are guides with us our entire life? And some people will say yes, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer that our guides change and evolve. I think that we probably will have souls, at least one of our higher teachers, who are with us from birth till death. But I do believe that guides change over time, and a lot of the old school spiritualists and spiritualist camps don't teach or believe that. In the spiritualist camps, the way that they teach it is that you have an inner band of guides and an outer band of guides. Your inner band of guides consist of a protector, a doctor chemist, a doctor teacher, sometimes called the doctor of philosophy, a joy guide, and then that you have your master guide who kind of oversees. It's kind of like the district manager, so to speak, of all those guides who work with you. And that when those inner band guides need counsel, they defer to that higher guide or that master teacher. And they believe that the inner band are guides who are with you from birth till death. So the protector is kind of, they back in the old days of spiritualism, they used to call it the Indian guide. And then it kind of changed to like the Native American guide and then the protector guide, because oftentimes they would be portrayed as Native Americans or indigenous people. So physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, their job is to protect you. The doctor chemist is sort of like, we could also put on the title healer, spirit doctor, spirit chemist, spirit physician. Their concerns have to do with your physical body, your physical health, anything of a healing nature, your body chemistry. And when you do different mediumship endeavors, there's physiological changes that take place in the body. So the doctor chemist is there to make sure that the energies are going the way that they need to, and that the systems are functioning the way that they need to sustain a higher vibration, to connect with spirit. Some people say, too, in regards to physical mediumship, that they deal with taking substances from the body to allow ectoplasm to manifest, but physical mediumship we're not going to really get into. Other people say that that's the job of a separate guide, who they might call an alchemist versus a chemist. So the chemist is more of the physician, the scientist, the one who deals more with external manifestations. Phenomena would be more of a metaphysician. But again, it's splitting hairs. The doctor teacher or the doctor of philosophy, they're the souls who, their main concern is this person learning what they set out to learn. They are the ones who will draw you to the right teachers at the right time, the right subjects at the right time, make sure that you encounter and cross paths with the right people at the right time. They're there to give you counsel and guidance and wisdom and philosophy. And then the joy guide, sometimes called the child guide, is often shown or expressed, portrayed as a child, or someone very young or childlike and playful. And their main job not only is to bring us levity and humor, but they can sustain the necessary moods and atmospheres for yourself or for your sitters or for a congregation or an audience if you're doing some sort of demonstrations. And especially in seances, they are usually the ones who bring the certain humors or energies to sustain sort of a light, high vibration. Now, in that paradigm of the inner band and the outer band, within your inner band, you also, one of those four guides usually plays the role of the gatekeeper. And this is where I want to explain what I see as sort of an outdated model of the concept of a gatekeeper and sort of the way that I view mediumship to work modernly. So back in the old days of spiritualism, the gatekeeper is simply, when you do message work as a medium or a clairvoyant, it's the guide that the other spirits have to go through to get in. They kind of control the communication process. You get to talk, you be quiet, you're next, you get in line. Harry, you gotta speak louder because they can't hear you, kind of a thing. So back in the old days of spiritualism, which is why sometimes you'd also hear the word control, in addition to the fact that a lot of the mediums back then, a lot more than today, did trance work, full, like deep trance control. But again, I just used the word guide. So back in the old day, this idea of the gatekeeper, I'll draw it first. So it was this idea that first there was this, that's SC, spirit communicator, and then the spirit communicator passed on the message to the gatekeeper. Then the gatekeeper passed on the message to the medium, and the medium passed on the message to the sitter. And I think there's very, very, very few mediums, if any, who still work that way today. More of the way that I tend to think of the media or the guide's role, or the gatekeeper, if you choose to call it that. I don't necessarily care for the term. I just say guide, or your main message guide, or your primary guide is one that I like, a terminology that I like. The way that I think of it now is that so this to me is sort of how I view the process now. I believe that as mediums, we can absolutely connect directly to the energy of a spirit communicator, and that the guide is there to support the process. The guide is there to sustain the vibration, and sometimes a soul does not know how to communicate effectively to the medium, or the medium's vibration is not in the ideal place to effectively communicate with the spirit. So the gatekeeper, or the main message guide, or your spirit guide, or your controller, whatever you want to call it, is there to act as an interpreter, almost. They'll say, okay, you might want to say it in this way so my medium understands. Or, oh, I know what you're trying to get across, but I know something in my medium's memory that's going to help them draw the dots, so I'm going to pull that from my medium's memory. So it's more of a three-way process in my experience. Just going to check questions here, one sec. BJ, everybody has a spirit guide. Julie asks, is it true you have to ask them to intervene? Well, if something, I fully believe we have to ask, or we at least have to have the want or desire to open up that line of communication. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by intervene. Now, I don't think that anything can, let's say if it's a life or death situation, if it's not your time, it's not your time. But I mean, there's not much physical intervention that's going to be done, because they're not physical beings. That's not to say that under the right conditions with the right medium, they can't manifest in more solid ways. But again, that's physical mediumship. That's not what we're getting into here. Now, Rick, he brings up a good point. Are your main guides usually dead relatives? So I am more of the school of thought that the majority of your spirit guides are not people that you knew in this lifetime. However, if you look at the word spirit guide, if someone's a spirit and they bring you guidance, you could consider them a spirit guide. But your spirit guides are qualified to work with you. It means that they've done the work, that they've had life experience, that they've grown, that they've trained in the spirit world. So Grandpa, who just kicked the bucket, might be with you and might offer you guidance, but that doesn't mean it's the best guidance for you. So when it comes to family guides or ancestral guides, we have to be incredibly discerning with that information. So that's the idea of the inner band. And then there's the master guide, who is sort of, as I said, a more highly evolved soul. They're sort of the ones that your guides defer to if they need some sort of help in how to work with you. Some people like to equate master guides with ascended masters like Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad and deities from different cultures and saints, and I personally have not found that to be true, although there's lots of people out there who will tell you that their guides are something special, and I promise you chances are they're not. In the same way that you were not Joan of Arc in a past life, because there's literally been billions upon billions of people that have had lives on this planet, chances are you were like a farmer. You know, it's a very slim likelihood that your spirit guide is a famous personality, and if it is, then you have to be able, you got to be prepared to prove it. They have to be prepared to prove it. You just don't take that at face value, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the interference of archetypes. So that's the inner band. And then there's the concept of the outer band, which are what we would draw to us, the guides that we would draw to us, that may only be there for a period of time, 5 years, a year, a day. You could kind of think of them like specialists. They're here to help you with either a particular skill set or for a, a granted period of time, but they aren't necessarily permanent. So I don't necessarily prescribe to the inner band, outer band theory. I just say that we have, if a spirit guiding energy is with you on a fairly permanent basis, then I just call that a guide. If there are spirit guides or spirit people who pop in and out once in a while or come for a short period of time, I'll say they're sort of like a specialist. And then sometimes we just have spirit helpers that help us. There's just a spirit helper. For example, for a lot of us, when we are mediums, when we're developing as mediums, it's not uncommon that we might have someone who was a medium or a spiritualist when they were alive to help us for a period of time. But it's very easy to recognize an energy or a presence of that and then automatically assume that they're your spirit guide. They might be there to help you work on one aspect of your ability. They might be there for a week and then they step back. They've got other things to do in the spirit world. So they're not a guide per se. They're a helper. That to me is the difference. So if it's more of a permanent basis, I just call it a guide. If it's more of an impermanent basis, I call it a helper. Or if they're just helping you with one particular aspect of your development, you could call them like a helper or a specialist. But again, it's terminology. It doesn't mean anything. What's important is that you recognize and work with the connection. Linda Harrison, we will get to that. Vicky, same thing. We're going to get to that. They ask, how do I contact my spirit guide? How do I find my spirit guide? It's coming. Don't worry. Now, so I guess instead of seeing like the joy guide, the protector, the chemist, the teacher, instead of thinking those like a checklist that everyone has to have one of each, I think some guides can fill multiple functions. So I tend to think of them as roles rather than assigned beings, so to speak. So guides can be teachers and healers and protectors and inspirers and inventors, and silly and serious, and they can be all of those things. To try to say you are like this, therefore you are this type of guide, I think is limiting. I'll save that. Actually, I'm going to come back to that particular point, but it's limiting. So to me, it's just, this is a guide or a helper. They help with this. They are like this. They do this. Now, I think that part of the reason that I don't resonate with the idea of the spirit band as a fixed inner band and then your outer band is because it's been my experience that guides change and evolve over time. And that only makes sense to me because I am not the same person today that I was yesterday. Therefore, the guidance that I might need tomorrow is not the same guidance that I might need today or yesterday. I use the analogy of eyesight. The prescription that you have at 25 years old is not the same prescription that you'll have at 45 years old and 65 years old. Your lenses need updated. Your prescription needs tweaked. It's the same thing. The guide that I primarily work with today in my work is not the same guide who I started out with. Now, I don't think that we ever necessarily lose those guides. I kind of think of it like the V formation that geese fly in. One leads the pack for a while because usually even though we have multiple guides, there's one or two that we tend to connect with or have more of a closeness with. And they can sometimes act like the representative for the collective of your guiding helper. Hey, we got lost, but we're going to get back on track. I think, though, what I was saying before the live cut off is that guides take on personas for our benefit. Everyone wants to think that their spirit guide is a nun or a Native American or a priest or a doctor or a biblical figure. And again, that's what they do for us. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with some of the pitfalls that kind of come from spirit guides. So one of the ways that we can connect with guides is through inspirational writing or automatic writing. That is a subject I'm not going to go too much into because I believe that we're going to be exploring it at a later date. Sometimes, and I've had this as well, a spirit guide can make themselves known through a psychic artist. We have to be careful with that because we can't just take it as the gospel truth. Anything that comes from anyone, we can't just take as the gospel truth. We have to question anything. So, you know, actually the primary guide who I work with now was first introduced to me, made known to me through a psychic artist. And I think that the spirit world got sick of me saying, you're going to have to prove this to me, even though it resonated with me. You're going to have to prove this to me for me to trust this, because I'm the type of person that spirit has to beat me over the head with a 2x4. I can trust implicitly for other people, but I doubt for myself constantly. And after all this time from 2012 till 9, I can absolutely finally say spirit has thoroughly convinced me of this guide's identity. The best way, we can always there's a lot of guided meditations, guided visualization meditations out there for spirit guides. And I do not like that because this is where I think we fabricate false guides. Because here's the thing, I've studied hypnosis, certified in regression. We had to learn all sorts of aspects of hypnosis from induction and relaxation and embedded commands and all sorts of stuff. But we had to learn and understand how the subconscious mind works. And if you give the subconscious a command, it's going to create that. And so there's lots of guided visualization CDs where you're walking down a path or you're sitting in a gazebo and you look and you see your guide approaching you. Well, if I just said today, everyone has a purple unicorn spirit guide. And now I'm going to take you on a meditation to meet, although that might taste delicious, to meet a purple unicorn spirit guide. Just because you're visualizing it doesn't mean you have a purple unicorn spirit guide. I gave your subconscious a command. It visualized what I instructed it to do. It does not make it real. So I do not like guided visualization when it comes to connecting with spirit guides. The most important way, the most accurate way, the most beneficial way, and sometimes the most unliked way, because it takes time to connect with your spirit guides, and people are impatient because it takes time, is through attunement. So what do I mean by that? We're tuning to the vibration of our guides and helpers. How do we do that? Well, we're going to do that today. In the process, essentially, Rick, we're learning to feel them first. And once we solidly trust the feeling of them, then we can open ourselves up to more accurate imagery if they choose to give it, names if they choose to give it, the other things that are just little extras. Now, you might think that because I'm a working medium and I've been doing this for so long that I know who all of my guides are. And I absolutely do not. I know my primary guide who I work with in my mediumship and in my readings. I have recognized when I sit in the power each day, as I have been giving you as homework, that there are different energies that work with me. And it's only been through time and patience that I've recognized certain themes when I feel those certain presences, those spirit presences. And so it's through reasoning and logic induction that I'm able to say, okay, when I am working on this aspect of my development, I get this sensation. And when I'm working on this aspect of my development, I get this sensation. Therefore, I can deduce that the guide who is assisting me with this particular aspect of my development comes in on this side. See, what we're looking for is we're looking for what we call in spiritualism the calling card. So you've been sitting in the power, you've been connecting with your own soul, and then you've been connecting with the oneness of the divine. And part of the homework that I'm going to give you, as I said, I'm going to take you through this process, this discerning process. But what we're looking for are these calling cards, and these calling cards are essentially sensations that our guides use to identify who they are and where they situate themselves in our aura when we are working on our clairvoyant development. So, for example, my primary guide, I call him Thomas. When I first started sitting and working on attuning to his energy, I would feel a pressure right here. And as I would ask his energy to draw close to me, that would be, my forehead would go numb. That would be how I knew that was him. Now, calling cards are great at first because we can get a sense of orientation. We can find our bearings with the spirit helpers who work with us. But we can't become attached to the calling card because it can change and evolve over time. So now when I sit for spirit and I then am at that point where I'm asking my guides to come in, it's not just the calling card on my forehead, it's a sensation of numbness that goes down my entire face. So that I know as Thomas's calling card. My face goes numb. Now, I have an energy when I sit sometimes that comes in that's not Thomas, because I know it's not Thomas because it comes in a different location than Thomas. So oftentimes when I meditate, I'll have a sensation that's like a light brushing against, it's my right, it looks like my left in your screen, but my right cheek. And then I will start to attune and focus on that energy, and I recognize it as a masculine energy, and I have a suspicion that this is a guide who I work with when I do any sort of spiritual healing, but it's one of those things that it just takes time for me to figure out. And there's other guides that help me with other things. There's spirit teachers who inspire me when I teach. There's Thomas, who I work with when I read or when I demonstrate. As I said, there's different energies that I connect with when I heal. So depending on what I'm doing, different spirit helpers may present themselves. But by learning to recognize their vibration, then we can understand it. And that's why sitting in your power, knowing what your own soul feels like, knowing yourself is so important. So when you have a baseline of this is what I feel like when I sit in the energy of my own soul, and then you open up and send the thought to spirit, I'm ready to meet one of my spirit guides, helpers, please draw close to me, then you can sense the difference. Because if it feels different than the way that you normally feel, then you can say, okay, there's an outside intelligence that's coming in here. Let me tune into it and blend with it and attune with it and learn who this is and how they're working with me and if they're for my best and highest good. So Elizabeth, it may be physical sensations. For me, it's often physical sensations. It could be something like a change of temperature, a change of pressure. Whenever you ask for a particular guide to come close, your head just always fills with one particular color. And it's only when you feel the energy of that guide close. Usually it's external more than internal, because that kind of helps set up a sense of location for you, which is a good system to have, because it's going to come into play a little bit later when we learn how to set up a proper message, how to set the framework together for a proper message. I'm just going to go back here and catch up on a few of the questions, and then I want to take you into the process itself, because I already talked a little bit longer than I expected to talk, and I do apologize for the breakup. So if you're on here and you just got on here, this is part 2. Go back and check out part 1 when we're done here. Angela, I can't see what you wrote because it only displays a couple lines. I apologize. Tiffany, we're not doing readings today, I'm sorry. So, quickly, Rick brings up a good point before we get into the process. Did you hear him say his name? Did you hear him say his name was Thomas? Thomas was the name that was given to me by the medium. Now, I am a firm believer of test the spirits. Don't take everything that's given to you as the gospel truth, even if it comes from a spirit guide. So for me, my thing is, even though they don't care as much about names, as we've said, it's more about the feeling, recognizing their vibration that's important. If you do get a name, then my thing is, okay, guides, if this is really who you are, or if this is really what you want me to call you, then you're going to have to prove it to me. And you're going to have to prove it to me good, because, again, and it's ironic that my guide that I work with I call Thomas, because I'm a doubting Thomas. So it was through a series of synchronicities to the point that I could not take it anymore, that I finally conceded to the fact of, like, okay, I feel comfortable that not only are you real, but that I can call you Thomas. And I'll give you an example of two of those synchronicities. So a few years ago, I was doing a life coaching certification course with Sandra Ann Taylor. And Sandra Ann Taylor was teaching a process that was very similar to emotional freedom technique, but it worked more with the third eye and some like NLP, kind of, changing the pathways of your brain to affirm more life-affirming behaviors and mindsets and break patterns and limiting beliefs that don't serve you anymore. So she was teaching this as part of the course, but it ended up being the material that she would use for the book, Your Quantum Breakthrough Code, that she would write through Hay House. So I used the techniques that she gave us to quit smoking cold turkey. And so she decided to use my experience as one of the case studies in her book. And so the book came out, the book was sent to me, I got it, I'm looking for myself in the book, but of course she's not using real names, she's using, like pseudonyms or code names or whatever to protect people's identity. And of course, when I get to my section, she calls me Thomas. So I was like, that was like the first, there was a bunch of little things, but that was like the first, like, aha, you okay. The second one was actually about a year ago, because again, I doubt, and even after I'm in a place, sometimes I slip back down into doubt. So I was, again, this always happens at periods of like huge transition in my life, because I can't ever do anything little, I have to do it big. So I had a lot of change all at once. And I had this book that was almost like a devotional. I'm not a religious person, but it had some religious-y overtones to it. And I was just at a point of despair. Just despair, feeling disconnected. My mediumship was foggy. I was just like, and I remember praying, I was like, God, or whatever is out there, I just need something to let me know that all of this isn't in vain. Like, I was essentially having a pity party for myself. And so I opened the book, and each day there was like a little message, and then a little thing where you could like fill in your name with the blank, and like a little prayer and an affirmation. And the whole theme for where I had opened up to talked about how I send my brother Thomas to you. And it was just really beautifully worded, and I cut it out and I put it in the picture frame with the original spirit portrait. So ask them to prove it to you. Ask them to prove it to you again if you doubt some more. Lisa, maybe I'll come back to that, but I gotta stick to topic because we're gonna run out of time. Okay, so we're gonna do this process, and then if there's time, if the battery is holding out, I want to do something that kind of builds off of some of the symbolism stuff that we did in class 2. So what we're gonna do is we're going to do a meditation to attune to a spirit guide. And then your homework for this week until next week is going to be to, as you sit in the power each day, you're sitting in your own power, you're blending with the oneness, and then get practice inviting your spirit guide into your space and building up a familiarity with their energy. So, as long as it's safe for you to do so, as long as you're not like driving a car, operating heavy machinery, get into a comfortable position. close your eyes, and of course, with everything we do, we work with the power of breath. So I'm going to have you take in a few deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, giving yourself permission to just let go of the stresses of the day. As thoughts come up, just notice them and let them go, and take your awareness back to your breath. Take your awareness back to how good it feels to give yourself this time to invest in you. Every breath you take allows you to feel more and more relaxed, more at peace. Notice how the relaxation is moving through your muscles, down through your shoulders, the back, loosening the abdomen, loosening the muscles in the thighs, the legs, and even allowing the muscles in your hands and your feet to just relax. And know that any additional noises that you hear will only assist you in going into the perfect state of relaxation for what we are intending to do here today. And I want you to start by taking yourself into your own power. So we've been practicing sitting in the power for the past 3 weeks. Take yourself to that spark of the divine that exists within your center. And use your breath, your mind, your inner eye, your intention to allow the light of your own spirit to expand and fill the fullness of you. And I want you, as you have been doing for the past 3 weeks, to just sit in your own energy. It should be familiar to you at this point. What does your aura feel like? What is your space, your atmosphere? Your personal ozone layer around your body. How does it feel? And if you need to ask yourself those questions to reaffirm, like color, texture, shape, sound, then just notice what you sound like. Notice what your energy smells like or looks like, or what texture or temperature it has. But let yourself continue to breathe and just get very clear in your own feeling. And now what we're going to do is we're going to send out a thought to the spirit world for the guide that's most appropriate and ready to work with us at this time to make themselves known to us. And it can be as formal or as simple of a thought as you like, but just think, guides and helpers, please draw close. Move as close into my aura, move as close to my body as you possibly can. And imagine that every breath you take pulls that spirit helper closer to you. And as you breathe and as you hold that thought of come close, asking your guide to come close, I want you to notice any changes in what you feel, in the atmosphere around your body, or sensation within your body. It may be incredibly subtle, so just notice everything. As you ask your guide to come close, come close, come close, you might feel a change in pressure or temperature. You might feel like you're being touched. You might experience a breeze-like sensation, even if you think it's natural or normal, such as an itch in your toe. It doesn't matter what it is or how little it may seem. I just want you to take stock of every feeling, experience you have as you invite your guide into your space. And so as you feel and notice these sensations or sensation, I want you to focus your attention on that location in which you feel it. Is it a sensation that's in front of you or behind you, to the side or above you? Wherever you sense that shift or that presence, just let your mind rest there. And as you breathe, I want you to try to tune into the feeling of your guide. So you've identified the sensation. Now I want you to try to feel into the guide themselves. What emotions come to mind when you let your awareness blend and attune with this spirit helper? Is it silly or serious? Does the energy feel big or small? Does it feel young or old? Is the vibration of your guide fast or slow? Are there any colors that come to mind? Or words that come to mind when you let your awareness rest on this guiding presence? Is there a sense of gender? Is it a masculine energy? Is it a feminine energy? And now what I want you to do is I want you to think the thought to the guide to back up. Ask this guide to please pull out of your aura, to move back until they're no longer standing in your vibration. And as you do so, I want you to notice again the changes you feel as your guide's vibration separates from your own and you return back to the fullness of your power alone. So just take a minute to do so. And as you ask this guide to back up, do you feel what you feel like once again? And if you have that sense of the baseline energy of your personal vibration, then I want you to ask one more time for that guide to come back, come close, draw near friends, draw near helper. And I want you to see if you have the same sensations or same calling card. Do I sense this presence in the same location? Does it feel the same way? Because if it does, then it shows you that there is an intelligence. That there is an intelligence that is responding to your thought. And just take a couple minutes to send the emotion, the feeling of gratitude towards this guide. And I want you to begin to ask that guide to step back once again and use your breath to begin to bring your awareness back to yourself, back to the room that you're in, back to the chair that you're sitting on, more aware of the sound of my voice. And take as long as you need to reorient yourself. If you need to wiggle your fingers and toes or stand up, go ahead and do so. But I encourage you to, before you forget, grab a pen and paper and write down what you felt. We talked about keeping a journal. I want you to jot down those experiences in your journal, or at least make buzzwords that you can come back to later and expound upon. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go back and see if there's any big questions we missed. Okay. So, why do we do that? One, it gets us focusing on vibration and attunement, and we're not creating imaginary guides or imaginary pieces of information because our subconscious is getting in the way with vision. Archetypes tend to be a big downfall. So for example, if you had a Buddhist background, or maybe even if you didn't, and you invited your guide in and they felt just wise and quiet, so you automatically associate, your mind automatically associates the imagery of a monk, a Buddhist monk. Now, that might not be accurate at all. Or if someone felt very, just highly spiritual. There's a lot of people who think, well, it's Jesus. Well, it's because it's an archetype. The shaman archetype, the healer archetype, the sage archetype, the wise man archetype, the protector archetype, the Native American archetype. And so we find, oh, they feel like this, therefore our brain sort of put the pieces together. And that's why I don't like the imagery aspect. Focus on feeling first with your guides. So, for example, you invited your guide in, and every time you invited your guide in, your knee started to tingle. And that's why I always like to ask our guides to step back and then come close again, and then step back and come close again, because sometimes your knee just tingles. But if you're asking and the spirit world is responding and you're getting the same sensation, you're getting the same calling card, it shows that there's intelligent communication there. And then once you build up that familiarity, you can start asking your guide, or they might just reveal to you images of the life that they lived, where they were from, maybe what they looked like, or a name to call them by. Or you can just say after a while, we've had this relationship for some time and I enjoy working with you and I love sitting in meditation with you and I love tuning to you, but you never gave me a name. I don't really have a name. I don't really know what to call you, but you seem like a Frank, so I'm going to call you Frank. Your spirit guides are going to be like, you need me to be Frank? I'll be Frank. Or if you have that issue with archetypes getting in the way, your spirit's guide's going to be like, Oh, you really need me to be like a Native American chief? Fine, I will take on the appearance of a Native American chief, and I will work through it to get true guidance to you. However, it's just better if we have more of a clean slate from the get-go than our guides having to adapt to all the baggage that we have floating around in our brains. So, your homework is to, again, sit in the power, continue sitting in the power, but as you sit in the power, after you've sat in it for a bit, then I want you to open up, extend your thoughts to your guide, and ask them to draw close to you. And again, we have numerous guides, but for right now, we're just working with the guide that's most appropriate for us to build a relationship with. So send the thought to spirit and just start working. If you didn't get much of a calling card before, you're not sure, then that's your practice. And if you did get a calling card, then bring it in and just hold the intention of blending and attuning with that spirit guide. Imagine that they're coming as close as they can. Let them influence your thoughts. Let them influence your feelings. And you can ask yourself those questions and go deeper and more specific with those questions. Now that I have this feeling that I can trust, this bond, I know that you're there. Do you feel male or female? Do you feel old? Ask yourself those things and see if you get anything in return. But more than anything, just ask them to be near, because the questions and stuff can come later once we have a firm trust. The specifics, who they are, what they did, what they look like, that sort of thing. Again, it's not important to them. The most important thing is just get familiar with their energy, sit in their energy, imagine that you're blending your energies together in the same way that we blend with Source when we do sitting in the power, and just be in a space of oneness with them. And that is going to be where I leave off tonight. There was a symbolism practice that was an extension of class 2. It's just going to have to be the top of class 4. And again, if you have questions throughout the week, hold on to them, and we will take them at the top of next Monday night. So, Lisa Noble, that's not weird at all. Absolutely. She said she felt yellow. That is legitimate. Color is light vibration, and it all has feeling associated to it. So, good work. I'm glad to see that you guys are sticking with it, and I will see you next Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern.